Hello students, I hope you're well today. We are going to continue in Module 13 in the biology textbook, and we're looking at some more invertebrates this time. Okay, so let's take a look at what we can learn about. There it is, there's your hint right there. The star of the show today is going to be the earthworm. Okay, all right, so let's get started. Here we go. So the earthworm is in a group of animals in the phylum Annelida. Okay, so Annelida refers to the group that includes what we call segmented worms. Okay, so these worms literally have little segments. You can actually see them on this picture right here of the earthworm. You can see those little segments right there. If you've ever seen one crawling on the ground or whatever, you can see those little segments. You can see them pretty clearly here as well. Maybe not so much on those. Look like pretty good segments, yeah. So oftentimes they're very obvious that you can see those little segments. So here's our big star of the day. You can see definitely some segments on there. In fact, if you get a chance to do a dissection of an earthworm, you can buy those at science resource places. And what I usually do for my students is I'll have them count the amount of segments right here, starting at the top, at the mouth right here, and count each little segment till you get to this little interesting structure on the body called the clitellum. All right, and then down here we don't care as much, but generally right here you're going to have that in the same spot every time. So we'll get to that a little more here. Okay, so let's talk about some of the anatomical features on these segmented worms, phylum Annelida. Earthworms being the main one. Okay, I'll show you some other ones as well, but earthworms are the ones we're going to key in on. So they have what is known as bilateral symmetry, which we covered last time, which means that if we cut it in half long ways, the two sides are going to look the same or similar, right? So that is one of their things. And then we have the anterior and posterior end, a very clear head and a tail. All right, so the anterior being the tail, where the mouth structure is, and the posterior being the rear. Some special features specifically of the earthworms, we have something called bristled setae. I'll show you a picture of that in just a minute. It's literally little tiny hooks on their belly that help them to have locomotion, help them to move. They do have a well-designed circulatory system, a full digestive system, and a nervous system. Okay, so the circulatory would be the way that their blood is being distributed, digestive, the way they are processing food, and then the nervous system, a form of some sort of nervous tissue. Let's quote unquote call that a brain. Okay, and then I mentioned the clitellum. All right, so here's the segments between segments 32 and 37. So if you counted from the mouth, when you get to segment 32, the clitellum would begin. It covers a certain number of segments there, and then it comes afterwards. We're going to see what the clitellum is for here in just a minute. All right, but before we move on to that, I want to talk to you about another kind of really exciting group of worms in Annelida, and these are called the Christmas tree worms. All right, they're called this, you'll see here in a minute. Mostly it refers to this part of it right here. It looks a little bit like a Christmas tree. These are marine worms, so they're found in the ocean, and we'll see that they use those little feathery projections there actually to catch their food. All right, so they're going to catch the food with the little feathery projections here and put it right down into, guess what that is? That is the mouth. Okay, so they have this very clear mouth. Remember the anterior part. Now, can you see why it's called a Christmas tree worm? The little projections look a little bit like this. This is a yellow one, of course, and it is sitting on top of a piece of coral. And they'll sit there, and as the coral sort of pull water towards themselves, these worms will benefit from the water coming toward them, where they can use their feathery projections to capture the food that comes their way from the water. Here's another one, a blue one. How pretty is that? Also sitting on a piece of coral, interestingly. But now we're going to get back to our earthworm. Okay, so if you have a chance, now you can actually go get some live earthworms at a convenience store. Mostly they're there because of fishermen. Fishermen want to use them as bait. And they would be in the refrigerated section in a little styrofoam box. And, they sell them, I don't know, a couple of bucks. You can get a package of 25 or something like that. Probably a pet store as well. But if you do that, if you go in there to take a look at them, open the little box, before purchasing them, and kind of just sort of bump them a little bit to make sure they're moving, okay, make sure they're still alive. You kind of want them alive if you're going to use them as bait. Now, for you, if you wanted to dissect one, you could do that. My recommendation for the live ones is just to observe them live. You can turn them over and see the belly of them and that kind of thing, and you won't need to go through the dissection process. If you want to go fishing and use them as bait, great. If you, after you look at them for a little while, kind of have them as a little pet, quote unquote, you can just release them into your garden, okay? Because earthworms in the garden are fabulous. The ones that you get from as bait may not necessarily be, the best for your garden for a long period of time, but for some time they would probably survive and do pretty well out there. All right, so let's look at the external anatomy. Remember, we have the front end, right? The anterior end here, the mouth. It's literally an opening, and they're going to eat, and it's going to come down their gut. We're going to count those segments. You can do that on a live worm too. Look here, they're counted right down here, 30, 31, 32, and clitellum. Okay? This part just means that the little worm is longer, and they just didn't include all the segments in there. We don't really care about the posterior segments. I can't even tell you how many segments are there. It's just we know that here we have that consistency right there. Okay, you're also going to see on the external anatomy pretty fun things. You will see the little bristled setae. It refers to it right here. Okay, I'll show you a close-up picture. And then sometimes you'll see these little holes right here. Not always, but those are part of the reproductive system of the worm. Okay, and we'll get to that in just a minute here. All right, so the feeding strategies. Earthworms will capture bits of food by pushing themselves through the soil. So you probably know that. The earthworms are under the ground. They're going to push through the soil. When they do that, they actually make the soil healthier. They're eating the stuff out of the soil, which would include compost, this kind of thing like rotting material and stuff like that. They will aerate the soil as they're doing that, which we know is good for the soil, which we know is good for the plants. And they will, when they defecate out their waste, that stuff is like really great for the soil. It's this more organic material added to the soil. Now let's talk about their mouth a little. Oh, real quick, the marine worms. Remember we talked about that. They capture plankton in their feathery extensions. Okay, we mentioned that already. Notice, by the way, they are. Ooh, let me go back. They are on a piece of coral still. Okay, so let's talk about the mouth now. I love this picture. You can see those segments really well. And look at that little mouth part right there, okay? It's like a lip that comes out. It's called the prostomium, and it is, I believe it is considered the first segment, and it is like a lip that can push through the food. It's got a little bit of like a stiffness to it, and they can kind of push through the food. That's why I have this picture here, like the cow catcher on the front of a train. It's sharp here, kind of to push through if somebody's on the tracks, so that the train won't be pushed off the tracks itself. So their mouth part is a little bit like that, so they can push through. And sometimes if the dirt's very hard, they can soften the dirt. They can aerate it and make it more friable, which we're always interested in doing in our gardens. Okay, so that mouth part here. I have noticed that sometimes when I do some dissections of the worms, that prostomia is not always real evident. It's there. It's just on some groups, I'm guessing it's more pointed than others. Sometimes it just looks like a segment. All right, but they do just behind that. Let's look at our digestive system. Once they start to eat, they're literally eating the dirt. Okay, and the dirt is going into their pharynx. All right, and through the esophagus to the crop. Generally, the crop is a place where the food can be broken up more. A lot of muscular action going on in here. So there's the crop and the gizzard. They're going to grind it up, and anything that might be a little bit larger will be made smaller. And then it's going to go through the rest of the body, which is the intestine. All right, so essentially, if you were going to describe an earthworm, you could say they're like a bag of guts, okay? A long bag of guts. And the dirt is going through them. In fact, when my students do go through and dissect these guys, when they cut into the gut accidentally, which is very easy to do because they're not huge specimens, and it's easy to cut all the way through them, you will see when you cut the gut open, it looks like there's just dirt in there, which essentially is what it is, right? Okay, so then their main feature, of course, would be to the digestive system is probably the main feature because that's their goal is to feed themselves, right, and to keep themselves nourished. All right, so what do they eat? So they eat the soil, literally, and things that are like mixed in with the soil. So when we say manure, we mean, compost. The roots that are down there, they will nibble at those. Some leaves, mostly leaves that have been incorporated into the dirt as compost or things like this. So they like to stay under the ground. Sometimes you'll see them crawling around, typically after a big rainstorm. You'll see them up and around. Sometimes we call them night crawlers because they'll come out at night. After a storm, they come up because they get flooded, and they need to come up to breathe, right? So they will come up out of the soil when it's after a lot of rain. Now let's talk about their waste products. Okay, the excretory nephridia. The word nephridia over here refers to kidneys. A nephrologist is a kidney doctor. So you can see how they're going to have excretion. All right, so we know that the dirt will turn into their feces on the other end. That's one way, but they also have a way of secreting liquids similar to like a urine, if you will. So the nephridia act like tiny kidneys. They push waste out of the tiny holes called nephridiophores. Now those can be sometimes visualized on a specimen, but sometimes they're really, really small. Okay, so I feel like sometimes I can talk myself into having seen the little holes on there. All right, so here you can see there are all these little dots right here. So you see quite a bit of tissue is devoted to that. Here we go, integumentary nephridia. That would be into the skin area there. Okay, all right. Notice you can see the digestive system is along here as well. Okay. Special structures. We talked about the bristled setae. They're on the belly side, right? Small, firm, hair-like structures to help the creature to move. They have this kind of really elaborate muscular system. You can see that right here drawn. Here are the setae themselves. They're like stiff hairs. And then you can see all this muscular tissue here used to move them along. I do have, here's a nice picture. See, that's very close up. You can see those little bristles. Honestly, if you have a little specimen, either from the bait store or if you actually can get a hold of a preserved earthworm, just use your finger to feel along the bottom. You'll feel them. It'll feel like a little catching your skin a little bit on there. You can definitely feel them. Okay, I have a video here. This is an earthworm. He's pretty big, actually, and it's clearly after a rainstorm. And you can see it. We're going to watch it move along. You can see it bunch up. The bristled setae are grabbing hold of the cement. And then they'll push forward. See, they're going through water a little bit. You see the clitellum right here. Now they'll stretch those muscles, and the bristles will catch, and they'll pull it along. Clearly the anterior portion here. Sorry for the loud noise. We'll see the posterior part here in a second. It's a pretty long worm. There it is. Okay, so not very fast. All right, so let's get to that clitellum then. Okay, here it is. That little barrel-shaped swelling or whatever, the little just structure right there, covers around segment 32 to 37. That's almost every single time we've done this with my students. It is at segment 32. It is part of the reproductive system. Okay, so we're going to see here, you can see it very clearly right there. Yeah, all right. You can also see that the anterior portion seems to be a little darker than the posterior, which is lighter, and also the tail end right there tends to be a little flattened. Okay, so let's talk about reproduction because that clitellum has to do with it. Earthworms are hermaphroditic. That means they have both male and female reproductive organs. Okay, so you've probably heard of a hermaphrodite, has both parts. But they do reproduce with a mate. Okay, they don't self reproduce, even though they have everything they need for that. And the reason for that, we would think, would be because of the creativity of God. He wants to have that integration of other DNA, right, to bring out the diversity. And to handle any problems that may take place. If you don't have genetic diversity, then certain genetic traits that can cause damage to the host. So they exchange this by kind of sidling up to each other and exchanging genetic information through that clitellum. All right, the internal anatomy right here. We've talked a little bit about the digestive system. The crop and the gizzard and the mouth area and the intestine, that kind of thing. But along here, you're going to see we have a series of little, what we call hearts, right? So those are, they're little muscular structures that pump the blood out through these vessels right here. Okay, and I think we use, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I feel like I remember there being 5 of those. We have our little ganglion here, a nerve cord. That's our, form of a brain. That's our nervous system. So that nervous system, circulatory system, digestive system, all of that, a lot more organization here, a lot more sophistication. All right, it's a closed circulatory system, which means that the blood is kept within the vessels, kind of like our blood is kept within our vessels. They don't ever escape the vessels unless, of course, there's a problem, a cut or something like that. So worms have a general closed circulatory system like we do. All right. The aortic arches. No, here's other place called them hearts. Here it's aortic arches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I feel like I remember seeing 5 in there. It might vary. I'm not exactly sure. Let's see. We have some other things listed here. The ganglia would be the nerves right along there. Okay, we're moving on now to the next phylum in this group, and we're going to look at Platyhelminthes. These are the flatworms. So think of like a plate being flat, okay, and platy being flatworms. They exhibit bilateral symmetry. They have a mouth, so an anterior end and a posterior end. Their intestines run the length of their body, like the earthworm. They live in fresh water. Their feeding strategies would be to feed on smaller organisms. That's interesting, right? They're going to actually be, like carnivores, right? So we can see some here, the famous ones. Right here is called the tapeworm. Those are very famous. You may have heard of this little guy right here. We're going to talk about him in more detail in a minute. The trematose, these kind of things, usually disease-causing right there. They do have often have a special structure called the eye spot, which can sense light. It's not less sophisticated eye like our eye with, focusing and this kind of stuff, but they know where the light and dark is. They are hermaphrodites once again, so they're carrying the gametes of both sexes. They do not self-fertilize, so similar to the earthworms, but they can go through a very interesting process of regeneration. And I'll show you that in just a minute. That's a pretty cool looking flatworm right there. I'm not sure exactly which one that is. Here's a marine flatworm. Those generally have some pretty elaborate coloring, very beautiful, but you can see clearly very flat. All right, this is the guy I really, really enjoy. Okay, so this is called a planarian, and they're just a lot of fun. I mean, look at it. First of all, if you have a slide of these, you can actually hold the slide up just in front of your face and see it on there. So they're big enough to be seen. They're not completely microscopic. But of course, this picture we're looking at right here is a microscopic view of it. So getting them closer up is always kind of nice. One thing that is going to, right off the bat, you're going to recognize, of course, are those eye spots. I mean, isn't that fun? A little cross-eyed critter right there. And like I mentioned before, those eye spots do sense light. So they know where the light is. Now, why might they want to go toward the light? Well, things are living in the light, right? Plants are living there. Animals are eating the plants that are living there, that kind of thing. So it's advantageous that way. So when I was in high school, we actually were able to work with live planaria. And what we were to do with them was to look at the way they regenerate, okay? So our goal was we would be looking through like a stereoscope, and the critter would be kind of down in a petri dish, and we would want to cut this critter. Now, the goal would have been really great if we could have cut them straight down the middle like this, but that was very difficult to do because they're moving around, and they're small. But we would cut them in other ways. For instance, right here you can see. So if I take my original worm right here and I cut off his head and I cut off his tail, the head would grow a new body, the tail would grow a new body, and I'm presuming that, yeah, the middle part would grow a new body. I mean, that is some pretty amazing regeneration. And if you think about it, as far as an evolutionary, quote unquote, tactic, right? Reproduction through regeneration is a pretty efficient way of reproduction, right? You don't need anybody else, right? They can do everything right there. Of course, this would mean they would have to go through some trauma in the sense of being cut, but it is pretty amazing how they can actually grow the new body. All right, we're going to watch a little video about it. I don't think it's quite as long as it says there, but I think I sped it up a little bit because it doesn't happen, fast. It takes a little bit of time. So let's see what we got. Oops, I missed it. I got to go back. I don't think that's the right one. Sorry about the volume. Okay, cut in half. There's the head, there's the tail. They're still moving. So 2 days, see, I'm going to speed it up here because it was taking so long. There's a new head growing, y'all, right there. That's a new head with new eyes. Look at that. Now I'm speeding it up again. Here's the head side. That's the day of amputation. Speed up. It's going to grow a new tail. Okay, so you get the idea. I sped it up because I'm not very patient, right? Okay, our next group, phylum Nematoda. The nematodes, all right? These are called the roundworms. They're very small. They do not have segments. Some of these are so small you do need a microscope to see them. Other ones are a little bit larger, and I'll get into that. Okay. They're hardy. They're found in harsh environments. Look at that, the frozen tundra, hydrothermal vents in the oceans, hot springs where things don't typically, live very easily, right? It's tough. Many of them, quite a few of them, are parasites, okay? So they're parasitic to the host, whether that host is a human or the host is another critter, it causes disease, okay? So one of the best examples of that is one called trichinella. All right, trichinella is pretty common, actually. Some are beneficial. We use them to control pests. For instance, you may have heard of people putting nematodes in their garden, and those nematodes, what they will do is they will go and eat other insects or things, or even grubs and things like that in your garden, and they'll eat them so that they don't destroy your garden. Pretty good. Okay. Reproduction, they usually form cysts. They do have a form of sexual reproduction as well. All right, so some special structures. They have round bodies. They have what we call a tough cuticle. That would be like the outer. It's not crunchy so much like an insect is, but tough. Yeah, they can survive the acidic digestive juices of a host. For instance, if we eat it, yes, that's how we can get diseased by them. They have little hooks in their mouths that help them attach to the host. Okay, so this is specifically one called a hookworm. They'll actually hook onto the digestive system of the host and suck the nutrients out. So I have a couple of disturbing pictures coming up, so I just want to warn you about that. It's just, they're actual pictures of these creatures, but it's kind of gross and creepy, okay, because we're going to get nice and close up to see them. So the mouth here, we can see, look at that, a piercing device that hooks out of the mouth. Yikes. And then, of course, the gut, right? And right here, the pharynx, that's all part of that. Nerve ring, right? So they have a little brain. All right, so that is a very, very close-up picture of the mouth parts of a hookworm. And you can see those little hooks coming out. They will extend even further, and they will hold on to the interior of the gut of a host. If you have a dog and you've ever taken your dog to the vet clinic, they oftentimes want to do a sample, like a worm test, right? And they will actually take a sample of their feces and look at it under the microscope, and they can find evidence of a hookworm infestation, because what happens is they will shed their eggs into the feces of the creature, and we can see those eggs under the microscope really easily, and they're very distinctive. So we can tell you, I can tell you exactly what kind of worm your dog might be dealing with. Okay. Oh yeah, this is disturbing as well. These are the roundworms that came out of the gut of an infected dog. Okay, it looks like spaghetti, I realize. That's gross. So roundworms can actually, excuse me, I meant to say they are roundworms, but I meant to say hookworms. Hookworms can actually be devastating to a puppy because not only are they sucking the nutrients from the little puppy, they're also actually sucking some blood. Okay, so they can cause anemia and they can cause other problems. So you want to take care of that. Typically what we do for puppies is give them a medication, right? This is a nematode that you would find that you would put into your garden. It's very small. I realize this one looks a little bit like it has segments. I'm not sure why that is the case, because they don't have segments. All right, Trichinella spiralis, remember this would be some of the parasitic one. And so one of the ways, for instance, that it might infect a human is if you eat undercooked pork. All right, specifically wild pork. Have you ever heard of like a feral hog? Yeah, we have them in Texas all over the place, and in fact, people get paid to hunt them because they're a nuisance, is what they are. But we have to be careful with them if you're going to eat their meat, because some of these parasitic little worms will remain in the meat. You can see right here, encysted larvae in the tissue of the muscle, and the muscle is typically, obviously what we eat. And so what happens is that can actually infect the human gut, okay? And you can have that. I don't know if you ever watch a show like The Beast in Me or whatever it's called, it's pretty creepy stuff. So how do we avoid that? Some people will not eat pork at all because of it. I would say that I'm not a big fan of feral hog, but if I were going to eat it, if you keep it, I believe you might want to look this one up, but if you slaughter the creature and then freeze the meat, I believe it's for at least 45 days or 48 days, you can finally eradicate that larva in there. That's my understanding, at least. So if you want to look that up, you can look that up for yourself. But if you can see here that it goes through a series of vectors, and that would be like the rodent right here, it can affect them. And then, of course, if the pig is eating that or eating meat scraps or something, they can get it. Mostly, I think you find that in wild, feral hogs. Pork that you get at the grocery store will not have this problem, okay? They are very keen on keeping their pork from having issues like this. So eating store-bought pork and domestic pork should be just fine. This is the muscle. You can see the little critter right there in the muscle, so that is a forensic view of some of those worms. Gross, right? Ooh, wow. We're moving on now to the phylum Mollusca, one of my favorite. These are the mollusks, and they have a very diverse set of creatures in here. I mean, just some amazing things to look at. So if you have a shell collection or anything like that, this is the time to pull those guys out, okay? All right, let's see what we got. This phylum is diverse, containing the gastropods, which we're looking at in the picture below there, the bivalves, and the cephalopods. So we're going to go through each one of these separately. All right, and you're going to be surprised at how diverse they are, because they're the shells, fish in these shells, yeah, but there are other things as well. So let's start with the gastropod. So gastro means stomach, pod means foot, so the name of these guys is stomach foot, right? They are what we call univalve. Univalve means they only have one shell. Okay, so an example of that would be a snail. So you can see snail down here. This is a land snail. I know it's a land snail. For one, it's on a leaf, but also you can see his little eye stalks right up here. Yeah, marine snails do not have their eyes on stalks like that. They're quite different, but they are similar in the way that they have the one shell right there. Look at that beautiful shell that snail had made from its mantle and made from its body parts. It secreted it and it hardened, so it's pretty cool. Let's look at their feeding strategies. Okay, they're scavengers, and snails in particular, and you know, gastropods in general, but snails in particular have this special feature called the radula. And the radula is basically their tongue, all right? And it's right here in their mouth. And if you can see this little black part right on here, this is trying to show it right there. The tongue, or that muscle that pulls food into their mouth, has a very rough, if you've ever like seen a cat's tongue, you know how a cat has that little roughness to their tongue? It's similar to this, but it's even more so because they can grind the food up. I might have a picture coming up. There it is. It looks like a buzzsaw, all right? So it just literally cuts that food up. It's kind of like teeth. Look here, it says odontophore, odonta meaning tooth, right? And it takes those particles and breaks them up. Look, we have muscle that's really pulling on there, so it's really quite strong and devastating to the creature that they're eating. Oh, yikes, there's a close-up picture. I should have warned you on that one. That's a very close-up picture of the radula of a snail. All right. They also have other special features, including the foot and the visceral hump. We will see that this basically the globbiness of them, right? And then the radula is the food part. So we're going to see, like in this snail right here, right? So we're going to see the visceral hump and the foot. Here's a slug. The slug doesn't have a shell, right? But it's still in this group. And we're going to see here this guy is a conch. So we'll get to the conch in a second. There's a bigger critter. So this is a marine snail. And you can see they have the little stalks, but their eyes are actually right down here. A little bit different. And this is part of that foot that comes out here. In reproduction, they have gamete production. In other words, they lay eggs, and there's sexual reproduction between egg and sperm of the different sexes of the creatures. Now look at the diversity here of gastropods. So remember, they have a single shell. So snails being a really good example of things, but there's other ones too. So if you have a shell collection, you have these really great, different types of gastropods, of single shell creatures. All right, so we're gonna see what some of them are called. So we have some whelks in there and other styles. Let's see. Let's move on here. Here we go. All right, there's a nice one there, right? I think it's still going to be in the snail category. All right. There's a conch, or a conch shell. So this is a conch right here. You can see his little things here. His little eyes are right about there. Okay, it's coming out. It's very rare to see one out of the ocean like this. Notice it's putting its foot onto its prey. Now this is a whelk. Okay, in fact, it's a left-handed whelk. And right there you can see there's a little covering called the operculum right there that's trying to protect it in there. But this guy will probably be successful in getting that guy out and eating it. Okay. All right. Oh, cowries are some of my favorites. Okay, so the cowrie shell used to be used as money. It was a currency because they're so beautiful. Here's a picture of it. You may have seen these. Okay, that's a living cowrie. Look at that shell. See how slick it is? You're going to see this foot right here, this visceral, the foot part of the body that's going to come. And on this particular creature, you can see his little head here. Yeah. They will actually cover the entirety of the shell. Okay, let me go back. They'll cover the entirety of the shell with the foot, and that's why it's so smooth on the top. So if you think about a shell, typically they're kind of rough on the outside and smooth on the inside. Now they're smooth on the inside because that's where the creature's living, and they want that smoothness. They don't want the roughness on there, and the rough is outside because it's encountering, sand and rocks and coral and all that kind of stuff, and so it has a roughness to it. But these particular guys keep the outside smooth because they cover it completely. I thought I had a picture of one with its whole foot covering the outside of it. Maybe I do. Maybe it's coming up. But I wanted to show you here. Typically, if you have one in your collection, a shell collection, you can see the underside of them. So the body of the creature would be inside here with the foot coming out and then covering the whole top of it. I love this x-ray to show you the beauty of the design because it would have started here and made its own little shell, and then when it grew, it made it bigger, and it's kind of this swirling kind of thing. Just a gorgeous design by God there. Oh, here it is. Yes. You see how it's covering the entirety of the shell? That's what's keeping it smooth. So I believe that's why it had value to it. First of all, you could string it onto like a string, you know, because of the way the interior part was, that little middle part. And you could make a necklace out of it or something like that that would be like for exchanging money. And I think the reason why it was is because they were so smooth on the outside like that. Really cool creatures. Okay, the bivalves, these have two shells. Bi meaning two, okay? So this is class Bivalvia. The other one was class Gastropoda. Sometimes these are called pelycopods, but I almost always hear them called bivalves. These include clams, oysters, scallops, and mussels. Okay, these are also very lucrative as far as our economy goes. People like to eat these. Snails aren't as lucrative. Not as many people like to eat snails as they like to eat these guys right here. So clams are going to use gills for respiration. In fact, the gills are one of the most prominent parts of the anatomy. You can also buy clams and mussels at the grocery store, some that are already cooked and frozen. You can open those up and you can see all these structures, which is kind of fun to do that. If you get fresh ones and look in, some people eat oysters, raw, and you can do that. You can go to an oyster bar and go get some oysters, and you can just take a look in there and see their little anatomy right there. I will say that this little mussel right here, this adductor mussel, is what keeps the two shells together. They're very strongly keep it together. If you've ever found one in the water and try to open it, it's hard to open. It's because those adductor muscles are very strong and they keep it closed when they want to be closed. Sometimes those are what we might call, quote unquote, the meaty part of the critter, right? So it's more like it's because it's muscle, right? Just so muscle like a steak, right? That is a very delicious part typically of the creature. They use their foot, so their foot they're going to show here, the big part that we normally would see, right? They're going to use that to dig down into the mud and then stick up something known as a siphon right here for feeding while they're kind of sitting down in the mud. Here we go. There it is. So they dig down with the foot, and that's for protection, right? Their shell is also protective. And then here we go. We have an inhaling siphon and an exhaling siphon to pull food in, and that's how they're going to eat. So they are filter feeders. Here's a clam. We can see that. We're just going to say some of the words here we use to describe their external anatomy. This little top right up there is called the umbo, and then you can see the growth ring. As they grow, they do add rings on. It's not exactly like a tree, that we can, one per year. It actually has more to do with what kind of environment were they living in. Was it filled with a lot of food at the time, so they might grow quicker, that kind of thing. They might grow more quickly in the spring and summer than they do in the cold winter. You can see here we have a siphon. We have the exhaling and the inhaling siphons. Okay, that's to pull food in and to get rid of wastes. For reproduction, we have sexual reproduction and the release of gametes into the ocean. We would call that broadcasting. And they will just release it into the water and encounter another creature and therefore get reproduction taken care of. Sometimes using a host right here. Look here, we see even carried around on the gills where they can start to grow and then go underground and finish their life cycle. Here are some of the diversity of the bivalves. In other words, the ones that have two shells, right? We can see right here some clams. This is called a mussel. This is called a scallop, one of my favorites. Beautiful shells. This is the scallop right here. They are crazy, y'all. They have those beautiful shells. But also, do you see these little things? What do they look like? If you're guessing eyes, you are correct. Those are little eyes. Now, once again, these eyes are mostly for sensing light. So they're going to go towards the light because, once again, what's in the light? We have all sorts of life, right? Because we've got the plants reproducing and then the animals eating the plants, and now we can have animals eating the animals that are eating the plants. Something like that. This is a giant clam, okay? You've probably seen these in the cartoons, right, when they open up and that kind of stuff. Sometimes they get so big they don't really have to defend themselves as much, so they'll stay open. And there you can see they'll be pulling water in through here and then eating the plankton-filled water that comes in through them. All right, inside a clam, look how prominent the gills are right there. Okay, very prominent. And then the part we like to eat down here, the foot. And the mantle is the part that's keeping that smooth inner part right there, that visceral hump. Oh, the cephalopods. These are so much fun. Cephala means head, pod means foot, as we already know. So I wonder if you've already read your module and you know what's coming, because you're going to be shocked and surprised that these are in the same group. These are awesome. Here we go. Ready? Squid. The squid is in this group. You're like, well, they don't have a shell. They are mollusks. They do not have an external shell, but we're going to take a look at them a little more. Squid are just amazing. Furthermore, they are also delicious. Yeah, so we call it calamari, right? So here's what they look like. We have a interesting, their mantle, right, is this kind of outer covering, if you will. That's the meaty part. That's the part we eat right there. But I want you to notice this, the internal shell right here, all right? That typically is known as a pen, P-E-N, a pen. And it gives some structure. And it's not like a bone. It's more like a piece of plastic. Yeah, if you ever get a chance to dissect a squid, they're fantastic. I would dissect these with my marine biology kids, and it's just a ton of fun. And you're going to see it's pretty simple. They have a fairly complicated eye, honestly. It's one of the best eyes of the animal world that are not mammals, okay? Mammals, of course, have the most sophisticated, complicated eye, including the human eye. But these are very similar, in the squid particularly. But also a couple other creatures have a more complex eye, but they're very complex in the squid. They have their tentacles. The tentacles we're going to look at up closely in a minute. That's in order to catch the food. These long ones right here are going to catch food, bring it to these. They'll pull it into the mouth. This is crazy. Their little mouth part, I'm going to show you a picture of it in a minute because you're not going to believe it. It's literally their jaw. This part is literally called their beak. A beak like a bird. I'm not kidding. Notice a radula, right? So there's going to be a way to cut up the food, but they're going to bite it and chomp it right there. Going down into their digestive system. Notice that liver, part of the digestive system right there, but also helping to regulate other like nutrients and things like this. We have our beautiful, beautiful gill right here. They're not really these colors, by the way. We have, this is called the gill heart. Interesting. It's helping to pump through here. Yeah, and so let's take a picture of some of the photos of these guys. All right, feeding strategies. Here's one actually eating a little fish. They use their tentacles to capture the prey, move it into the mouth. Small fish, other small organisms, as you probably know, squid can get quite large. There's the giant squid and perhaps even the colossal squid. We've seen evidence of colossal squid. We've never actually seen one, as far as I know. We have something in ice from like Australia or something like that I believe is the giant squid. I'm not sure if it's considered a colossal squid. Let's take a closer look at those tentacles. Okay, once again, you can buy squid tentacles and octopus tentacles to eat. And if you get them, like I think Sam's or Costco sells them, you can actually see those little tentacles. They probably clean off the edges so the sharp parts aren't there, I would guess. I'm not necessarily a fan of squid, or I do like calamari, but maybe not octopus. Look at that close up, y'all. Oh my goodness. Those little teeth on there are going to be, and they're actually pulling water through here that creates even though I don't like the word suction, it creates a vacuum type seal. Also, I don't like that because they're not real. That's not a real scientific term. But they're just pulling water through, causing a change in the pressure, and then they can hold on to them, okay? All right. Here's another version that's more of a hook-like structure on the tentacle, depending on the type of squid we're looking at. Now, here's a picture of the mouth. So we can see here the tentacles coming out, right? And then there's a muscle right here holding the mouth. Look at that mouth, y'all. Oh my goodness, I have a better picture. Ready? Look at that. Do you see why we call it a beak? That's nuts. That's what it looks like. Can you imagine encountering one of these giant ones and that giant beak opening up? What's that one the one that's not real? The crackum, whatever that one's called. Kraken? Yeah. All right, reproduction, gamete production. Look at those are their egg sacs. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, they're just, oh, beautiful. You'll find those washed up on the beach every now and then, sometimes empty because they would have hatched out already. But I had the next picture, super cute. Check it out. There they are developing in those little egg sacs. Isn't that amazing? They got that very complex eye already in there, and their tentacles are forming, and then they'll break out of there and be ready to go feed themselves. All right, here's one with tentacles. Now these tentacles that come out. So an octopus would have 8. The squid has 10. 8 plus the 2 that are the feeding tentacles. The nautilus, that's this guy. Look, he's got the external shell. All right, but he's in this group. And he's got the external shell, and his tentacles can be up to like 100 of them as far as I know. But notice they're shorter. Yeah, that kind of thing. They're cool critters. Look at that shell. The organization, the creativity here. It's actually mathematically precise. And what I mean by that is that the room between this one and this one has a certain ratio, and the ratio of bigness, you know, the size from here to here, and then from here to here is the same ratio. Okay, and this is happening naturally. So the critter starts here, builds a tiny shell, then adds it on and moves to this chamber, then moves to this chamber, then moves to this chamber. So he's living in the outside chamber, and he uses the rest of these chambers. Notice this little thing right here. It's a little hole, and they can actually put water into the shell to make them sink, and they can squeeze the water out of the shell to make them rise. Okay, but people have looked at this. There's a ratio situation here. I think it's called the golden rectangle. That it's utterly precise, which just screams out that this is designed and not accidental. Okay, so we're going to just watch a little bit of this for time, but it's going to show one of these guys swimming. They're a little bit clumsy. You can see his eye. He's got a beautiful eye, right? Right there. Notice his siphon right there. They look prehistoric, don't they? Bumping into stuff. Trying to get away from the cameraman, I think. So essentially he's swimming backwards, right? There's his siphon. Okay, I think you get the idea. If you want to go look up some videos, if you have permission to do that, about nautilus swimming around, it's pretty cool stuff. And maybe even look at that ratio thing. It's fascinating. All right, so are we in module 11? I thought we were in 13. I think that module might be wrong up there, okay? Because I believe we're in 13B, right? So probably the old book, it was 11. So sorry about that. All right, just a review of the things we've covered in this module. We have the porifera, which would be the sponges, the cnidaria, which would be the stinging creatures, jellyfish, hydra, coral, sea anemone. The annelida are the earthworms, which we talked about today. The tube worms, because we talked about the Christmas tree worms, but there's also the giant tube worms at the bottom of the ocean. Pretty cool stuff. The mollusks, including the clams, snails, oysters, squid, nautilus. Platyhelminthes, the flatworms, and the nematode are the roundworms. Okay, so that's good review if you have a quiz coming up or a test coming up. All right, if you have a chance about labs, you might want to see if you can dissect a worm, or at least, like I said previously, go get one at the bait shop and just take a look at them alive. Now, you can take a look at this. If you're not going to dissect, this is essentially what you'd end up with, is something like this. And you can see the parts in there. Now, I will tell you that I don't always have the success of seeing all the parts every time we dissect these, depending on their how large they are, the length of them, and that kind of thing. But you can give it a try. But that's it. Then we're done with this module. We're done with module 13. I think we're all done. There we go. If you have a chance to look at shells, look at any kind of scopes, the planaria, that kind of thing. If you get a clam at the grocery store, go for it. Okay, gang, thanks so much, and I'll see you next time for module 14 when we're looking at some more animals, some more cool animals. Okay, so long.